You got to remember to, Deb, can you hear me, Deb Shiraz? You can? Excellent. All right, good. Remember to spotlight, right? So that, because they sort of see, they don't, oh, look at Jeff. Good morning, good afternoon, Jeff. All right. So I nearly had a stroke because I thought I had only yesterday's I hadn't made all the slides for today, but I looked at it, there were slides from last week with this date, but then I found out that I forgot to delete the first set of slides because I used the same intro. So like, whoo! So down there, so I have to skip through those, but take a little stroke. By the way, the Knights of Columbus are going to be in touch with you, Denise. I gave them your number about forming a team to go out. They'd like to be a team that goes out. Just that there's a team, Knights of Columbus to form a team to go out on another night, another day.
Okay, Paul was going to start asking people if they'd be willing to go another day. We're going to see about it.
Yeah, so anyway, they'll be in touch with you. It'll be a night stay. Across the street ministry.
Because we could use more teams to go out.
Yep. Yep, good. Okay.
My husband was asking me, you have all these classes online. You've been doing this for a while.
Nice, welcome.
So, is the first class available on there? How the first class is
I have to talk to Tyler because Tyler's the one who puts them, who takes care of that. I'm not sure what he did with these the first set of the. Are you talking about last year or the first two I had?
Well, probably the first two
from this year.
From this year.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if he's done them yet. I'll have to ask him.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me send him a text. Oh, I can't because I have this on. We'll be in touch. You know what I mean? We'll let you know. Good. Everybody's online. This is going to be a very interesting class because it's a good topic. Conscience. Freedom and conscience. The last one, I'm not going to get to sin. I didn't realize how slow I went last week. I didn't realize how slow I went last week. I see you laughing, Deb. Charest, I see you laughing. All right. I thought you weren't going to be here. Oh, that's right. Boy, the weeks go by fast, huh? I know, because I got to go to Poland. Last week I thought, oh, we have it listed here. We know what we got to do. We got to become friends. You guys all got to get to know each other. We're going to have this is my catechism class, you know. You guys all should become friends. We should move everybody from this side of the room to that side of the room. Then I could teach right here. Yeah, there you go. You know? Right? Come and sit right here, right in front of us. Yeah. See, then you guys can really hear too, right? We got a seat right here for you, right here. This will make us intimate and caring and loving and all those stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Lisa, you can come and sit right up here. There's it. We'll put a chair over here. Move them on this side. You guys sit way over there. It feels better this way. I feel like I actually have a class. You know what? I don't need the podium if I got this. If I got a table. Get all my notes. I see them. Did somebody say something? Who said something?
I did.
What'd you say, Deb?
It's all about community.
It's all about community. You're right. You got it. All right. Let's say a little prayer. There you go. You don't mind squeezing in. We're one big happy family,
We
right?
just introduced ourselves and we didn't before, so something.
Right. So now you guys know each other.
Right.
A little bit. We know our names.
All right. Denise.
That's the nephew. No, that's Dan.
All right, let's say a little prayer and we'll start. All right? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, as we delve into the teachings of the faith, this catechism, we ask you to be with us, to send your Holy Spirit, open our hearts and our minds, free us from the things of this world that block us from knowing you even more. Through Christ, our Lord. Amen. Amen. Great. So you remember this. We always do this. So for those who are, oops. What's the matter?
He's going to go sit in the back so you can see when hands are up.
Oh, okay. Like, what? I just got to make this work. I forgot with my pencil. All right, so just a reminder that if there's any cancellations, please check the website right away. You know, you'll be able to get that in, get information, because I can even add it myself and hit publish, and then everybody knows the information. And if you want to sign up for flock notes right here, you should get the little flock note that I, by the way, in this flock note, I added 3 links for the Blue Mass. Hopefully you got a chance to see it. They did some great coverage on Fox 23 and on Channel 8, as well as on the Sun Journal. You couldn't? Oh, you have to bring your computer in and I'll show you how. We'll see what's wrong with it. People say, I have no idea why. All right? So remember the catechisms, any one of these work, right? Right here, any one of them. The newest one is the blue one in the upper right-hand corner that has a few different changes that happened that Pope Francis made. So that's why that's there. Just in the one I use is this one here. So if I'm referring to pages, that's the page. Those are the pages we're using. All right. So remember that we have no class next week because we're having the blessing of the manger scene and the altar at the Basilica. The bishop will be there. So please come to that. You know, if you want to experience that, the equestrian order will be there. And yeah, Lisa, you could just put a chair right here on the edge, right there. Right there at the end. All right? So we can go this way. Anyway, so and then I am going to Poland on the 14th and 21st, because we're going to take a trip to Poland next year, right? And I'm going to go there and scout out with the travel agent the places we're staying, the places we're visiting, so that then I can know what I need to teach everybody when we're on that trip, because it's not a vacation, it's a pilgrimage, and so a whole experience of learning. So we want to make sure that you get a chance to do that, all right? And then we'll be back on the 28th, right? So I always like to look, if you've got the book I've got, what we're on is page 454, all right? And the 454 is really just for us to help us understand that we are in the section of part 3, which is about what? The moral life, the living, how we live our life, right here. See, it's how we live, the morality of our faith, right? And what's part 3? What's part 2? Sacraments, right? Part 1? Dogma. And part 4? Prayer. All right, so those are the 4 pillars. I stopped showing them, but I think I'm going to have to put them back again because you guys forgot, right? So it's dogma, sacraments, or liturgical life, then the moral life, and then the prayer life. Those are the 4 pillars on which our faith stands. And oftentimes, people just focus on one of them, which is often the moral life. This is what it means to be a good Catholic or a good Christian. And even though we know that there are good people everywhere. That doesn't make somebody a Christian being good. You are good in response to what God has revealed. So this is where I had a little heart attack, because I needed to go back to here, because I had, oh, you know what? That first light's on. I was wondering, this usually we shut off there. Okay, so we're in Article 3. This section is based on the dignity of the human person. So before I talk about, for the church, talks about what is right and wrong, what's a sin, what is not a sin, it starts with the source of finding that out. And why do we do this? And our very basic teaching is the dignity of the human person is in chapter 1, and it's broken up into 8 articles. Sorry, I thought it was 9. 8 articles, right? We did the image of God, our vocation to beatitudes, to blessedness, to holiness, right? And then human freedom, man's freedom. And this is kind of where I stopped in the middle of this. Then we're going to try to go through the morality of human acts, the morality of the passions, moral conscience, and the virtues. We'll leave sin for next time, I guess. All right. So if you remember that man, freedom, now it's broken up, this article is broken up into 2 places where we talk about freedom and responsibility, and then freedom for our salvation. That's I always like the way the Catechism kind of, so we're in the moral life, splits up, right? The very first part is going to be on the dignity of the human person. It's going to have 9 articles, right? And then this is, man's freedom is Article 3, which is where we are. So if you were thinking about it, if you were in a college class, right, you would memorize all that order in terms of how we would do the exam, in terms of what are the 9 elements, of the dignity of the human person. So remember that we're going to just do this very, very quickly, because it's important that we say in 1730, which is where we left off, and I'm going to backtrack a little, right, where God created us as rational beings. Rational meaning that we can think, right? We can reason, right? And he gave us the dignity of the person that can initiate and control his own actions. Therefore, I act. I can make things happen. I can do things. Now, because I can do things, we also have to have a judgment of whether I should do them or not do them. God gave us that as well. But in this way, he can, in his own, seek his creator and freely attain his full and blessed perfections by cleaving to him. Man is irrational and therefore like God. We believe we're the only ones. Little Cece, wherever she is, she's not on the pillow. I don't know where she is. Oh, she's back there. Okay, she's not, we don't call her a rational being. Right? She's not a rational being. We are rational beings. We're the only part of the entire creation that we know of that can reason. Only we can reason. All right? So that is a gift that is proper to the human being. Therefore, every gift comes with responsibility, right? So anyway, that's why in the next section, defining freedom. Freedom is the power to act or not to act. What happens is that as we continue to act in a certain way, we then lose our freedom. Not lose our freedom, because we can always change that. We can always change and decide not to act. But we become more of what we call habits. The habits that we have, both for good and bad. So virtue is a good habit. Vice is a bad habit. And what happens is as we make choices, the next choices become quicker and easier to make. And that's the way human beings are made. Otherwise, I would have a dilemma, and you've probably met people who are paralyzed because they can't make a choice because they start all the way from the beginning, right? And you're like, okay, wow, you suffer terribly, because you can't decide. And usually what happens is we make decisions, and then they form our habits, and they become part of what we are. And then pretty soon, we don't necessarily think of them as free anymore, but they really are. We still can choose to do them and not do them. So to perform deliberate actions is of one's own responsibility, the ability to shape one's own life, to grow, mature in truth and goodness. For Catholics, that is always directing us toward God, toward the truth, toward the good. So that's where we're headed, right? That's the goal for us. And so the key is going to be, as long as freedom has not bound itself to the ultimate good, because here we've got this freedom to do all these choices. If it's not going to be to the good, right, then there's the possibility of choosing between good and evil. Then you have the possibility of saying, well, then if it's not going to be that, my freedom is bound to choose is bound to the ultimate good. That's where I want to be. Then now freedom is, I can choose between good and evil. Right? And that we would say that, for as Catholics, you are never free to do evil. You have the possibility to do evil. You can do it, but we should say you should never choose it. No one should choose evil, right? But even though you have the possibility of doing it, but they're the basis of blame and praise, merit and approach. No one praises something when it's done without freedom. So you, in binding yourself to the good and you choose the good, there's nothing virtuous to that if you were forced to do the good. Everybody says that, right? I was forced to go to church. Therefore, there's no praiseworthy in going to church, right? Because you were forced to go. And then now I get to choose for myself, and I choose not to go. And I'm like, there's nothing praiseworthy in that either, right? So anyway, this is where we are. So the good and freedom. And we're going to, responsibility, this is the freedom. There we go. The one thing I want to get to my page here is we want to pick up. So this was partly a review. This is really a kind of a review of the text. I want to pick up on this page here. This is my first page, just so that I cover it. Anybody have any questions? All right. Oops. Sorry, this page. I'm like, that's the next class. All right, freedom and responsibility. There we go. And human freedom and the economy of salvation. So that's why we have freedom offered in Christ. So I'm at 1739. This is where we're starting, 1739. When you see economy of salvation, it means the human freedom in the way we can get to heaven, our salvation. So one of the things is that because we have sinned from the original sin, right, the disobedience and the turning away from God, and then the sharing of that, it says we have become a slave to sin, right? We become a slave to sin. To anybody who has started to do the wrong thing recognizes that every choice after that, it's going to be easier to do the wrong thing and harder to do the right thing. And then when you're bound in the middle of it, it's like slavery. Think of someone who commits adultery, right? And then deadens his conscience. I'm using a him, it could be a her, right? Deadening his conscience to the point now where he is so deep in it that he can't stop it. He can't break it off. Emotionally, he can't break it off. Spiritually, he can't break it off. Even probably he has no more willpower to break it off, right? Because he is now, we say he's a slave to it. He's no longer free. The easy one we always use is smoking, because that's one everybody kind of it's a habit that we all know of people who struggle terribly, or alcoholism or drug addiction, right? The first couple of them are perfectly free. You chose to do that. You could have easily not done it. And every time you choose, now you become less and less free to be able to choose it, to not choose it again. And that's the thing about evil. And so history shows, that the difficulty and the oppression that has been part of the human heart that we've all experienced is really the result of the abuse of freedom. Because it could have been otherwise. And I think we all know it could have been otherwise, right? We all know that. Look, if I had not done that, I always like The Godfather. He's trying to get out of it. He's trying to become an honest man. And that phrase that I always say, it's just like, every time I try to get out of it, I just get dragged right back in. And that it's those people, once you've been blackmailed, once you accept the gift, free choice, here's $1 million, now you are beholden, right? And who works, the whole bribe system and the whole gang system and the whole, Godfather system, mob system is built on that. I'll do this for you. You make your choice. It's kind of the Matrix. You choose the red or the blue pill. It's your choice at the beginning, and then you live with the consequences after that. But once you're in the net, man, it is hard to break out of that. And that's why we need a Savior. That's where Jesus comes in. right? So that's where grace comes in, and Christ came to break the bonds of the chains. And so we carry these things, and that's what we're going to talk about in a few. But it breaks it open right here on number 1742, where grace of Christ does not rival our freedom when freedom accords. So it's like God gives you the freedom to break free, but to what is true and good in the human heart. We're always free workers in God, but God will give us the grace to lift us out of this difficult thing. In 41, he came to set us free, and he says that himself. These people who are bound by things. All have had the experience. Does it sound like a human experience that we all know in one way, probably in different levels? Being no longer free. One of the things you know that once you lie, you're free to lie, you're free not to lie. Once you lie, you got to lie again and again and again. And then now you're trapped in this lie that you have to keep going. The TV shows often do that, right? And then more importantly, though, the damage that's done, because people say, well, once I lie, that we know that changes things, because now the person who knows I lied will always remember he lied to me once. He could lie to me again. This could be a lie. I don't know. It sounds like it could be a lie. And that's what the damage is of an abuse of freedom, that now we have this, what they call a burden. The abuse of freedom, when you don't choose the good that we're all designed to, you have a burden that is placed on you now. And even though in your brain, in your crazy mind, you think it'll be better, you might think you'll get away with it, you might think it will work, we say that conscience will come in as well. All right? Anybody have any questions about that? Because freedom is going to be something the church represents, especially now when we start talking about morality and conscience. And some people in the Catholic Church, they're really pretty strict about making sure everybody follows the line. And the church is much more giving than most people in the church are. It's one of the reasons why I always make a separation, right, between the mind of the church and the minds in the church. And children probably can't do that because their perception of Catholicism is your perception of Catholicism. And oftentimes when they reject Catholicism, when I'm listening to them, they reject their family's expression of Catholicism, not really the faith. And that's been because we often have taught the wrong things or expressed it the wrong way. I always have this wonderful thing, or the angry Catholic mother. Remember there was a video that went around a couple of times, and he was trying to tell him that his son was trying to tell his mother that he was atheist. And the mother's like, what do you mean you're atheist? You got confirmed. You said to the bishop. He said, no, but things change. He said, you know what? If you don't believe in God, then you're getting nothing for Christmas, because Christmas is about Jesus Christ. And he's like, fine, I don't want anything for Christmas. I'm like, okay, this is really going bad, right? Because if anything's going to be convincing is that's it. That's why you should believe in Jesus, because you get something for Christmas. But I'm sure her frustration is like, I don't know what to say to my kid who's not believing anymore, rather than tell me why you don't, which never was part of it. Talk to me. What is it that you don't believe? What did you hear? Where did you come up with this idea? But I think it's threatening for us, because we're like, I don't know what else. I would not know what he said, and he might even convince me that I shouldn't believe either. But I say that only because oftentimes when they're rejecting something, they're often rejecting, and Bishop Barron brings this up all the time, and I agree with that 100%. They're rejecting a wrong expression of the faith. And I remember I used to be teaching at the at the St. Dom's, and they would tell me, I don't believe this, and I'm like, I don't believe that either. They're like, how could you not believe that you're a priest? I said, because that's not what the church teaches. But that's what we communicate over and over and over again to everybody, So, sources of morality. So now that we know we're free to act and we can act, right? Where do we find the sources of this? The first is and this is 1750, all right? Moral acts depend upon the sources. Sources mean, how am I going to make this decision? The first is the object chosen. So now we're going to get philosophical, right? This is the object chosen. you are doing this. This is the thing you've chosen. Objective means something that the subject does, has, gives, takes, right? The end or the view, or the end of the in view, or the intention. This is the reason why you did it. Your intention, your motive, right? So, and then there are the circumstances of the action. Now, this is, you can see, this is in Catechism 1750. So when you're going to look at something that you judge whether it's right or wrong, there, the church doesn't say, because the church said so. It says, this is how you find out something's right or wrong. Look at what it is, look at the intentions and the motives, and then look at the circumstances surrounding the intentions and the motives. Okay? So the Catechism states there are 3 things that determine a moral act. And that's why, and some of us, we do this intuitively, but others, you'll see that they don't do it intuitively. So the act is that physical action, like I'm going to move my hand, that kind of thing. Right? So the object is the good toward which the will is determining. And then you'll see the intention is 1752, right? And that is, the intention is the acting subject. I'm going to have that intention. It explains that. All right? And then remember, a good intention, though, does not make a bad action good. They said, right, that way to hell is paved with good intentions, right? In other words, just because you had a good intention, it doesn't mean that you can do a bad act. The action has to be good as well as the intention. So you can say something like, and now this is where the moral classes get fun, because you say, now look, so you killed the man, right? So you killed the man, right? That was the action that happened. Now, what was your intention when you did that? Because killing, obviously, is a bad thing. So we could go through all these exercises. But the intention was to save yourself because he was attacking you. That changes. My intention is not to kill him. That's one of the reasons why the whole just war theory goes through all that stuff. But this idea is that the church has a very clear way it works through these things, and says, well, my intention is not to harm him. My intention is to take care of for my safety. All right? However, you can't do an evil, and you can't have an evil intention to have a good act, because the intention, in other words, some people who they believe that that's good for them, but they're going to get that way, like, I can give you $1,000. That's a good thing, right? But what I'm going to do is steal it from these people to give it to you. Well, I said, I can't do that because, and my intention is, I have to, the means to get there has to be as good as the end as well. In other words, it has to be good all the way through, right? It doesn't, and we have people who have, we have people who have very, what we call very kind thoughts. What do you call it? They're very considerate. They're very, very charitable. And they come up with some good ideas, but they have very poor ways of carrying them through, or evil ways to carry them through. Like one of the things is I'm gonna come up with these ideas off the top of my head that we used to practice in class. Like something where I am going to express my dissatisfaction or my anger or my displeasure with you, right? And so the way to do that is to demean you or something like that, which obviously would not be the right way to express my thing or to have anger, but that's why we say, well, my intention is to tell you what I'm thinking, but it doesn't mean that I can do what the world does today, which is say anything they can possibly say to express that, but that I have to have a charity in the way I'm doing it as well as the end in which I'm doing it. Should make sense to you, right? So good intentions are just as important, and your intention is not, all right? And so something intrinsically disordered, such as lying, can never be seen as a good. And that's 1753. It even gives that example. This phrase that's very popular is the end never justifies the means, the way to get to that end. All right. So we talked a little about abortion last time, and of course, to me, when you run these things through there, it's very clear. It's hard for me to anyone who knows the Catholic moral life can think anything other, but I know people think other things. So if the intention is to have a good life, the only way to get there is to have an abortion would be absolutely wrong. All right, because you can't have a means in order to have a happy life is to do something evil in order to have a happy life. But there are many other ways that you can work that out. And if you have a problem, let's say you have a dilemma or even a case study, we should feel free to bring it up. What would happen if you said it and we could work our way through them? All right? And then 1754 talks about the circumstances and the consequences. But what's important about the circumstances is that and this is very significant because we are not what we call consequentialists or circumstantial morality, is that everything's based on the circumstances. It's like, no. For example, someone who's 22 years old, who's got a good full career in front of them, and they have and I'm going to use abortion again only because it's easy to throw that one out, to see that circumstances still doesn't change an evil act. So somebody's like 20 years old, he's got full hair, instead of that, full life in front of him, so she goes and has an abortion, okay? So therefore, that's obviously wrong. But then you say someone, let's say, who is has 7 children already and has the 8th child, and they can't afford to have the 8th child, so therefore they'll have an abortion. So that's still wrong, because what you're choosing is still an evil, even though your intention, you have the circumstances changed, and you think that it might be okay then because the circumstances are different, that we would say no, because there are some things that are always intrinsically wrong and the circumstances would never. That's why in 1754, there's that little thing. The circumstances and the consequences are secondary elements to the moral act. They can increase or lessen the moral goodness or evil of the human act, and they can diminish and increase the responsibility and culpability of it. Circumstances cannot change the moral act themselves. So, and they're a great thing. So what would happen? This is a big one of the moral dilemma they have. Okay? So we're in Nazi Germany, and I have Jews in the attic, Jewish people in the attic. The Gestapo comes and says, "Are you hiding any Jews?" And I say, "No." And now I've lied, which lying obviously is wrong, right? And my intention is to save these people, so against an evil force. But can I do evil to combat evil, to save the life of the people in my attic? The other thing too is they would say, like, now there are 4 people in a raft, right? And you could be saved if you throw one overboard, and then it won't sink. Is it morally okay to dispense of one life, to throw one out of the boat, so that then you can be saved? That ends up in the end killing one. So those are all moral dilemmas, and we'd have to have a case studies and work through them. This is an introductory class, but it's so great to kind of work through those what they do, case studies or circumstances, to figure out, well, how would I work through this problem? How would I work through this dilemma? Because there are things, and you'll learn them a little later, there's things like we call principle of double effect, in that there are 2 evils that are going to happen here that I have to face. So what's my chance to choose the lesser of 2 evils, right? Is that the best? Because that's the best I can do, given this fallen world, But if there was always a good to choose, then I could never choose the lesser of 2 evils, right? So if there was another option, and that's one of the reasons why oftentimes in like war and just war was there another option? Is this the only option you had? And those are where the fight goes through in terms of whether there is such thing as a just war, or especially today, and the way we fight wars today, and is this one of defense or one of offense? And that's the fight goes on, right? Because morality's been around for a while. I mean, since a human being could think. And if anybody have any interesting thing to say? Oh, good. You got to have a microphone because those 20 people online are not going to be happy.
So you made me think of something I heard on TV, on the news, where the Pope made a comment about our upcoming election.
Oh, yeah.
And in my history, I've never heard the Pope or the Church make a direct comment about two people.
Yes, but what did he make?
He said, there is evil, different levels of evil in either one of the candidates, so you have to use your own judgment and vote for the lesser of evil.
Okay, so that's a good thing. He still, wait, now wait a second. He did not tell you what to do. So, because, no.
Choose.
Oh, yes, you have to choose, right? You want to vote.
Yeah.
Now, if you think there is one that's less evil than the other, you've already told me who you think is voting for. But I'm going to tell you one thing. If I could have two people here and one thinks that one is the other one is the evil one. So you're just assuming maybe that the Pope is telling you not to vote for a certain person because that one's more evil than the other one.
Well, yes, but he didn't say which one was worse.
Exactly.
He did not.
If he had, I would have been shocked.
Yeah.
But you know what, though? I'm going to say the same thing. I think, personally, this is my own personal opinion now, that the elections in the United States are corrupt. That the people, that how you get there, you sell your soul to get there, right? And you owe lots and lots of people. And that you've lost your freedom. Right? And I don't think anybody that gets that high, and I learned that from my mother told me that years and years ago. She's like, anybody who gets that high, right, has already corrupt. And she's like, because that's how you get there. Yep. Right? So I don't believe, what's the matter? I believe myself that by the time, this is my own personal opinion, this is not church teaching, right? That at least where we are in the United States right now with all the lying that happens on both sides, everywhere, the false news everywhere, that and there was, I think it was the highest number ever, that people said, they don't know what's true. I don't know anymore.
That's right.
What's true.
It
just seems like everything changes and anything can be said and then it'll be carried around and anybody believes it.
Yep.
So myself is like, you're right. I think what we're often faced, and I think it's true. I've voted for many years. I'm voting for the one I dislike the most. I dislike the least. Sorry. I want to say that I like the most. Yeah. No, that I dislike the least. Because I'm not a fan of the way all of this is coming down.
No. So much money is spent.
I know.
On elections today, it's ridiculous.
I always talk about, it's like, we should, this is my own issue, okay. So, I need to sell that chalice and give it to the poor. I'm like, look, the amount of money you spend on this election, right, could build schools and schools of free daycares and everything. What are you talking about? The amount of money that we spend. So, to get the person elected. And oftentimes, the one who is giving the money knows that it's much more profitable for them, whoever comes in that they're supporting. It's usually what happens. So that's why the Pope, I think, when I heard about that with the Pope, I'm like, absolutely. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have a Trump supporter that says, I am voting for Trump because it's the lesser of two evils. Or I'm voting for Kamala because she's the lesser of two evils. But what I always love is that when they hear that, the Trump supporter thinks you're right. That's why I would never vote for her. He's going to vote. He's telling me I need to vote for him. And then the Kamala's supporter will be like, see, of course, everyone thinks Trump's the worst of the two, right? So it depends on whether you're watching Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, right? Yeah. Oh, that's just so anyway, But you're right. We're not allowed to say to vote for anybody. We're not. And I think we got some instructions from the diocese. But I encourage you to vote and vote your conscience, which we're going to talk about in a few seconds, because you have a conscience. Vote your conscience, and then live with your consequences. Okay. If you win. If you not win, then you can just always be just self-righteous that, I would never have. All right. So under moral freedom, now we have, did I forget to do that one? Yes.
I heard that
Oops, sorry.
that someone was offered $20,000 to marry somebody that wasn't in the church, and that the person, in fact, the priest denied them, even though there were things that were broken in the church.
Yeah.
That they really could have used the money.
Right. So she said that she had heard that there was a time someone to be to marry this person, that they would get $20,000 if they got married. They married the person, and the priest refused that, even though it would have been great to have, if they had given us $20,000 to marry the church, to marry these people in the church, right? And that's a real thing where, if this is the right thing to do, I don't care. You can give me $1 million. It's not going to happen. And I had that situation in myself where someone wanted to get married, and they said, "Oh, come on." I was like, "No, you can't get married in the church. You have to be Catholic, whatever it is. It was a church." And they said, "How much do you want?" And I'm like, "I don't want anything from you. We're not going to do it." I mean, he happened to be a sort of wealthy man in the town I was assigned to. I'm like, "It's not going to happen, because I'm not going to give it to you." But you could see where people would be like, "Wow, if you pay enough for it." And I'm sure there would have been probably some priests who would have said, "Well, let's see what we could do," But I think that's a sin all the way.
I was just.
You have to use the microphone, and
Let me.
if you're going to ask a question, because those people gel me.
I was just going to say, you were talking about voting your conscience, but I think the important part to that is that your conscience has to be informed.
Right. That's the next section. We're going to talk about formed conscience. Inform your conscience.
Right. So you have to know both sides of it before you make a vote.
Right.
Yeah.
But even people who form their conscience, if you are of one political persuasion, you're going to form your conscience. And when you form your conscience, two people forming their conscience the very same way. I mean, very, very, very same way, but yet can come out with different conclusions. In other words, forming your conscience doesn't always guarantee that two people will come out with the very same solution.
But I'm thinking that if you're a good Catholic, you would want to know what the church says too.
Yes.
And that's where you would form your
But what
conscience.
happens too in moral is that you got to rank these as these are very important to me, and these are not as important to me. And so, well, for example, I would like to talk a little politics, but I got to get through the conscience, because this is going to be because how I work through all of this. One of the issues I have is how do we solve poverty? Okay, how do we solve that problem? Okay, it's going to be around with us forever, so we're never going to solve it. But how do we address it? It's kind of a better word. How do we begin to move in that direction? My belief is we have to build communities, and build communities, then everybody, and get people to work, because there's dignity in work. And so we have to begin to allow lots of people in the free market to work and be able to create environments where everybody gets to work. I think that as soon as we have a handout state, that it diminishes the human being's self-worth, right? And to become dependent on the state. I'm not a big fan of that. So I think that things like welfare is something that's temporary to get people up out of a situation that we're brought into, but that the goal is always to move them beyond that. It's never to have a society that has generations of people. And I think that, and I think we should build much bigger communities where where families are encouraged to take care of families rather than, and so, it's called, John Paul II had some writings on this, and he talked communityism or something like this. It was a phrase he used, is that the whole focus is to build relationships in communities. That's the goal that we do, and it's a whole different orientation. So that's kind of but we're stuck in this, Democrat and Republican world, which is what we're born into. But I think that there could be other things that we don't focus on that we should have focused on. But they don't. The problem is that they don't. Nobody gives to those ideas, right? So I remember when I was during Ronald Reagan's time, when I was just studying for finance at the time. What came out was that Marriage Act that had that big tax break for 2-income families. So if you had 2-income families, there was another form you filled out. I have no idea where we are anymore because number one, I don't have a second income, another spouse having an income, and I have no idea. But back in those days, you had to fill out a form, and if you filled out a form, you could get some reduction because it encouraged dual income, or it didn't tax people for having double income, both spouses working. And I remember saying at that time, it's like, why isn't there a huge tax rate for people who have only one income? They probably say, yeah, it is. You don't get enough money. But the problem is that you don't make enough money to live, right? But why aren't we encouraging families to come to take care of themselves? Why are we giving, my own thing, why are we giving daycare breaks and not people who stay home and take care of their children breaks? And probably they say, well, that's because they're supposed to do that. That's what they're, but I say we have a society that's going and encouraging people to have other people raise their children, rather than let's have ways where families can say, and I know lots of families in this parish would say, I would love to stay home and raise a family, but I can't. I have to work. And I'm like, well, that's part of a problem. Why are we in a situation where you have to work? Why isn't there, a situation where it helps people to stay home and work and to take care of their family and raise communities and begin to take walks in the afternoon anymore with kids? But that's a different world I live in.
They're worried about abuse.
They're worried about abuse? Yeah. Who is?
Well, if you give that kind of assistance to a family, you can't check on them.
That's true. That's true, but you don't. He said you're worried about abuse because if you don't, because you can't check on how do you find that happening? How do you find if that's happening, right? No, he's got it all right because he's. The question I have is can we come up with some way where you have to take care, where people who do raise their own children and are able to stay home and make it work? If you want to have 4 kids, and you want to raise a family, and you want, on a regular income, a regular blue-collar worker income, just have a nice, decent family, why can't you do that? Why can't they help it?
Yeah, he had a situation once. We have 5 children.
She has 5 children.
And he had asked for a raise once at work, remember?
He'd asked for a raise at work?
Yeah.
I'm just telling him because they can hear it online.
Oh, and you were told no because his boss knew that I was working, and he felt that he didn't need to have.
Because you were working. Yeah. I think I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of people raising their own children and not spending more. Right now, children are raised by some people other than their families for 8-10 hours a day, right? That's who raises the children and because you get them from 5 to 8. They go to bed at 8, right? It's done. So the rest of the day, it's somebody else in charge of your children, And I think it'd be interesting to see what if we really thought that was a value in our society, that we wanted to encourage family life, But it's not. Well, we're just spending all of our time making sure that there are gender-neutral bathrooms or something, Now everybody's going to be mad at me. It's like, I don't know. It's the value of priorities there. This is what happens when you talk about morality. You know, we get all kinds of things going, right? Just to let you know, the passions now, this is what's important. This is what separates us from the world. I think lots of decisions are made on people's feelings, their passions. What's different about Catholic morality is that it is not based on your passions. They're pieces of information. So whether I feel happy, sad, glad, you know, what are your feelings about this? And this is 1752. The passions or the feelings that we have, a person's experiences can dispose him or contribute him to the blessing of the act. Feelings or passions are emotions or movements of the sensitive appetite. So you'll hear the word appetites, passions, they all kind of are the same, that incline us to act or not act. I feel moved to do that, right? So you have these feelings. Now, passions are natural. The church recognizes that everybody has passions. Human beings, and they're beautiful things. That's why I love something, so I go toward it, right? I hate something, so I repel against it, right? I move away from it, right? But the most fundamental in 1765 is love. Love is the biggest attraction. I love it. Pleasure and joy are good things, right? And evil, we believe, the human heart, it produces things like hatred, aversion, fear, sadness, anger. These are the things that evil causes in our life. And so to love is to will the good of another. So when I love something, I love someone, the definition is not feeling. I feel this love. Notice that for us, the love, the purest love will be, and this is Thomas Aquinas, and Bishop Barron brings us out a lot. The Catechism is right there, 1766. Love is to will the good of another. I want what is good for the other person, even if it comes at my own expense. Right? I'm willing to sacrifice my life, like Jesus, for the good of another, for the salvation of another. So even if it comes at my expense, right? And that's why, and we find that all the other affections that we have, right, in this movement in the heart to the good, only the good can be loved. If you love anything that is evil, right, then you have to, we would say that person's morally incorrupt, right? That anybody who loves the evil, they love to see the fighting. They love to see the people going. It's like, we would say that is a corruption of the human being, because the human being always wants toward the good and chooses the good. You know, and that there's something wrong.
Isn't the word love kind of used a little too freely?
That's one of the reasons why the church defined it as the will. To will the good of another. Okay, that's how we love, and it feels less passionate because really I love chocolate, right? I love Reese's peanut butter cups, right? And that's why I love you, and I want, you know, the whole love for marriage and all of that stuff. Is that, well, to love, we would say, is to will the good of it. That's the supreme experience. So you can see now that all you want is the other person's good. That's the sign. What happens is when it says, hang on, Arlette, when it says, I love you, right? And you do things because you love them, because it makes you feel good, it makes you like it, it makes you happy, then it's a very self-centered love. Because the love, the purest high love, is to love the other, to will the other, the good of the other. I do what makes the other person happy, what makes the other person better, what makes the other person good. That's the sacrifice, selflessness, other-centered. You will the good of the other. You know, so my goal. I always say when people get married, right? I always say husband and wife. When they both do it, when they both will the good of the other, that's what they're obsessed with, is the good of the other. It's a sacrament. It's a message of God's love for the church, right? Christ's love for the church. When one does it, it's called abuse, because one wills the good of the other, and the other one always takes for the will of myself, right? What's good for me. And so what you have is someone always doing the good, wanting my good, and I want my good. And the relationship is built on that, right? Is rather than, yes, I know you want my good, but I want your good too.
Selfless love.
Exactly. Yeah, the highest form is to lay down your life for your friend, right, for the good of another. But what we have is passions that rule us over our reason, which is what we're going to find out in the next thing, is that passions rule our reason. So when the passions rule our reason, then we're all over the place because we believe that the right order is that the passions are subjected to reason. So I would never love something that isn't reasonable to love, right? But we know that because I love, sometimes when I was addicted to food or to the sugar, I love it. And even though I knew it was wrong, I couldn't help myself, right? Because some people who go into affairs and things like that, they can't help themselves because their passions are now out of order, and now it's not reason that's running them, but their passions. And that's the only reason why people that have finally lost all their freedom in an addiction, why they lose their house, their family, over gambling. And it's like, how could you do that? Well, obviously, reasonably, they would never do that, but they no longer have reason. They're only acting on their passions. The passions are ruling their life, and they're doing all kinds of things that are crazy. And I personally think that this is where we are today, where passions are ruling all kinds of crazy things that are going. And people and I, we think that when you have the proper order, like I have the good in mind, my reason is toward the good, and I direct my passions, my reason, my passions are subjected to my reason, then the things that make me happy are the things that are good. The things that make me sad are the things that really are sad, that are bad. And that's when you know that. And how do I know? Because see, we live in a philosophical and existential world where that whole order, which it comes from philosophy and the Greek philosophers down through the whole wisdom literature, has all been thrown out. And now we say, what's good for you is good for you. What's good for me is good for me, right? Isn't that what we always say, right? And then they say even something like, and this is where I'm going to argue, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That is not true. Now, you might think something's pretty. That's one thing. But beauty is connected to God. So if anybody was to sit here and say, look at a sunset and say, that's the ugliest thing I have ever seen, I would say, you're nuts. There's something wrong with you. Or to see this beautiful scenery, right? And to say, it's just so ugly. That nature is ugly. I'd be like, really? Wow. Or to have this I was going to say something that was really ugly, or like they say, let's say use something like war. It's like, I was watching that war movie. I just think war is so beautiful. Be like, are you kidding? Now, I'm using the extreme to make the point, but there are some times when people would say, I think that's amazing, and I'm like, to watch torture, or, those people who are, throw that out. What do they call that when they torture one another in relationships? What is it called? Sadism or something like that? Yeah. Be like, okay, that's deformed. That's weird. And it should be called weird, but I can't call it weird because we live in a culture that says whatever you want to do is fine, right? Whatever makes you happy if that makes you happy. And I'm like, that should not make you happy. You have no right to tell me what should make me happy, right? And I'm like, that's probably true. I won't tell you what makes you happy, but I'm going to tell you one thing. That's weird, and I call it weird, and everybody's always called it weird, except weird people who go call it weird. Now, I know that if ever this goes viral, I will be killed for this, right? Someone's going to shoot me for this.
So something that is.
Oh, you know what? I got this microphone.
Oh, okay.
Something that
Now go to Arlette.
it is it's like a modern thing across like reality TV shows and stuff like that. And then I think gradually as a result of that, the regular culture has been kind of picking it up, is people talking about my truth.
Yeah.
Like their own truth. Like, oh, it's my truth that I live this way, or it's my truth that, I do whatever. But if everyone has their own version of the truth, that's a subjective version of truth. Like everyone could have a different variation of truth. So then it's like, does the truth not matter anymore? Because there's only one truth. And if everyone has their own subjective truth, it's a perverted world.
Well, see, this is a play on words because, and Arlette, I'm sorry, I'll go right to you, right? Because I'm going to need to, this is a play on words because there's the word truth, okay? The truth is an objective reality because it cannot be based on whether I think it's true or not, because then that is a subjective reality. That's called opinion. Truth is something like it's objective. It's outside myself, and therefore I discover the truth. I don't make up a truth, right? Because a truth is something that is eternal. That's what truth is. So when you say something is my truth and it's not your truth, then it's not truth we're talking about. What we're saying is this is my opinion and that's your opinion. But we've redefined the words because we want it to be like truth. But truth has to be something objective because the whole point of it is that you discover it and it becomes true for everybody in all time. Because if it's true for me and it's not true for you, then it's not true. It's opinion. That's one of the reasons why they say, well, you know what? In reality, there is no truth. And I'm like, well, is that true? Right? Because that has to be a truth, right? That's going to be one truth in the world. There is no truth, because that has to be true. So if there's one truth in the world, then what makes that one truth the one? Right? And that there is no truth. So I think that's a philosophical argument that they always argue, that you could say that we believe, as Catholics, there is truth. And we discover the truth, and the truth is God. God is truth, right? And that as we discover it, we then align ourselves with it even more and more. And that's what forming our conscience is all about. So we discover that truth, right? So we don't make it up. We don't define it. And this is really part of, if you remember a few classes ago, I talked about the two world views. The contemporary world is called existentialism. Existentialism is when there is no defined definition of a human being. It's what my experiences of a human being is what a human being is. And what your experience of a human being is your experience of a human being. Now that's not what you're going to find in our church, in any of our teachings. We believe that there is a Christian anthropology. This is how we understand the human being. And that I understand that as I fall short from that perfection, I call it sin. Right? Because that would be the perfect human being, that God made us a certain way. All right? And that there are things that are broken in this world, no question there's sin in the world, but we work our way through this in discovering the truth. And then once we discover the truth, if you're a follower, a believer in the truth, you don't have an option to believe it or not. You have to believe it if you know it's true. And number two is you have to follow it. Because it's true, and we work toward the truth. And I'm sorry, Arlette, can you come back with a question now? Arlette?
It's okay, you covered it, but I was going to take it a little bit further, but you're just going right along with what's in the book, so it's okay.
Oh, okay, all right, no problem. All right, so let's take a look at this one here, the moral conscience, because I just want to get to that understanding. That's Article 6. Article 6, the moral conscience. It's going to be 1776, the year of our birth as a nation. The famous definition of a conscience. This is what the church believes. Deep within his conscience, man discovers a law which he has not laid upon himself, objective, not subjective, Oh, okay. I have not, this belief of good and right, I didn't make that up. It's outside myself, right? But which he must obey once he knows it's true. Its voice ever calling him to love and to do what is good and to avoid evil sounds in his heart at the right moment. I shouldn't do this. This is wrong, right? For man has in his heart the law inscribed by God. His conscience is man's most secret core and his sanctuary, where he is alone with God and whose voice echoes in his depths. And it's Gaudium et Spes 16. You find that it's a quote that they quote. And that's the basic definition all Catholic priests have to, famous definition. Deeper than a law that is laid upon us that we all must follow. All right, and I think that's very, very important. And the judgment of a conscience. So now I have this law and I have to pass a judgment on it. I put this picture up. Okay, this is 1777, right? The moral conscience tells man to do this good, avoid this evil. And it's also a place of judgment where one approves the good and denounces the evil. Like, not only I need to do that good, but that's not good. That's bad. That's evil. Now, they say, who am I to judge, right? That's our world now, right? Well, you are. You have that built within you to judge. Now, you are never to judge a person. Like you're going to hell or you're not going to hell. That's for God alone, as Jesus says. But you can look at, the rape of a woman and say, that's evil. That's evil, and we need to call it evil. We don't need to call it anything else. It's rape, and it needs to stay rape as something that's evil. And that should never be done and never tolerated, right? Even as people can choose it. How one relates to truth in reference to the supreme good, which every person is drawn. When you listen to the conscience, we believe, you hear God speaking to you. Because that's where God speaks, is into your conscience. So we all, Now, this is what's important. You have to think. You have to reflect. You have to pray, right? You have to live what we call a life of interiority. To know, if I'm telling you that God is in the center of your being and that you love, and that he speaks to you there, then you have to listen. You have to take the time to listen to that. So that's why the church gives you number 1778. Man is obligated to know, no, that's just that you're obligated to it. Conscience, that was just telling you Christ. I like the little quote, that's why I wrote it down here, 1778. Conscience is the aboriginal vicar of Christ, meaning aboriginal. The original voice of Christ comes in man's conscience. Okay? Now, it's 1779. You must have interiority, self-examination, introspection. Something that I believe the world does not foster in its very distracted, fast-paced world. Matter of fact, I often believe, in my arrogance, that the world doesn't want you to stop and think about this. That's why it keeps you busy and busy and busy, because you would say, geez, we shouldn't really be doing this, right? Or we should be doing this. But what you have to do is just stop and think. And I always love the Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart, when he kills a man and he puts him on the floorboards and then his conscience, he's bothering him crazy, the heart beating, right? Because it's like the conscience it's going to speak to you. And it's not you just talking to yourself, we believe. There's something greater than that inside you. That's where good and evil comes from. That's where our choices are often decided, The conscience has the upright a moral conscience to understand the principles of morality of right and wrong. So there we can judge things. And one must assume then, in 1781, so because we have done all this, God has made you as a rational being. You have feelings and will. Now you can choose the good. And God has also given you a mechanism where you can begin to hear what is good in your heart. And if you follow the good thing in your heart, you will always choose the good, even you're obligated to follow your conscience, because the church even says, if you truly have listened to your conscience, then God's speaking to you, and you think that's God speaking to you, you must follow it. Now, of course, if you're deranged, we'll have that. The other paragraphs come because God tell you to kill somebody, right? That probably wouldn't be true. Okay, so in the faith of your conscience, what results for you after that? What does it mean you have to take? Nice and loud.
Responsibility.
Now the whole world of responsibility comes in. Because now that God says, I have done all of this for you, I've given you a moral conscience, now you have to take responsibility for your actions. And this is, I believe, another thing the world doesn't want you to do. It seems to be, lack of any responsibility for the actions that you take, the things you say. And the church says, yeah, no, you have responsibility for your actions. If one commits evil, then the conscience within him remains committed to that universal truth to do good. You do evil, that conscience is still going to call you to do good. All right, and then hopefully you know mercy, which is then more coming after that. All right, so you have to make that moral decision. Then I want to make sure we just finish the formation of the conscience, because this is what's important. Because this is really what's abused. Is someone say, well, in my conscience is clear. And I'm like, well, that's because your conscience is malformed. Like, what do you mean? Because are you telling me that if your conscience is clear for not, let's say, for not forgiving someone for the, my conscience is clear, I don't have to forgive him. And I'm like, well, you have not informed your conscience, because it's very clear what Christ says is part of our conscience, which is, to forgive as you want to be forgiven, right? So if you take a look at conscience 1780, for me, the conscience must be informed. There's responsibility. All right, the conscience must be informed. Judgment according to reason, conformity, the good willed by God. So this education of the conscience is indispensable. You, as a Catholic, as an adult Catholic, have the responsibility to form your conscience. All right? And sin prefers one's judgment and rejects authoritative teaching. Not what you want. So somebody said, well, this is what I want, my conscience. I was like, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about what you want. We're talking about what your conscience is telling you. And, right? Because we're going to tell you that the conscience is not just you talking to yourself. Have you talked to God about this? Right? Because you might come up with a very different answer if you talk to God about it. Right? And conscience in 1784 is a lifelong task. Teaching virtue. Is this a virtuous thing to do? Prevents fear, selfishness, and pride. You filled with pride. Education of the conscience guarantees a freedom and peace. You learn it. You're like, I must make this decision. Now, 1785, the Word of God forms our conscience. The Bible is important. And the cross of Christ. Tell me what the cross of Christ says about this. So, well, it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be hard. And Christ did something really hard too, for a good. What are the gifts of the Holy Spirit that were given to you? The advice of others who are also listening to their conscience, and the authoritative teaching of the church that has a whole history of reflection on God's word and God's teaching. Now, you must choose what your conscience ultimately makes.
Are you saying that, conscience is intrinsic to a human?
Every human being has a conscience. To know the good and avoid the evil. Now, I didn't say what was good or evil, because that's part of the formation of the conscience. But every human being has a concept of good and evil. That there's something good and there's something bad. And you're never to choose the bad. That judgment, and the voice of how to choose the good is in the conscience, and everybody has one. Now, you can kill your conscience. You can deaden it. You can stop listening to it, for sure, which I think some people have. It's like, okay, because all you do is just watch 17 hours of YouTube shorts, and you'll find out you have no more conscience, right? Because I've done it. Like, whew, that's, you can deaden that conscience. One of the things that deadens a conscience is sin, right? I mean, someone says, I've been married, you got 5 kids. All right, and you go to the grocery store, and the lady at the grocery store looks really cute, but she has a cross on. And you hear a voice that says, you should marry her. All right? And then you say, my conscience is telling me that I should marry her. I have all the feelings that I should be marrying her. And I'm like, I don't think, you got 5 children under the age of 6. I don't think God is telling you, because one of the things God would be is consistent. You can't just use what you feel. You have other information. What does the cross of Christ say about this? What does temptation say about this? There's a lot of other elements that you go into forming your conscience rather than, I saw the cross and God wants me to marry her, and leave my 5 kids and my wife. Ridiculous. But today, I can't call it ridiculous. So that's my disclaimer. I can't call it ridiculous because the world says that you can do whatever you want, or whatever will make you happy, right? And I'm like, yeah, no, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it is. I believe it. I can't believe it. So 1787, man faces difficult decisions. There's no question. Acknowledges, we will have tough things to figure out in this life. But we're always to seek what is right and good. And what is God's will in my life? And God's will always be what is the good for everyone, not just what's good for me, what I think is good for me. Because how many times have you done something think it's good for you and you realize, okay, this was not good for me, and I learned it really the hard way, right? But God wants to. But that's why, so you know the situations we have to deal with. Like, let's say someone's marrying an alcoholic. Now, everybody knows she's marrying an alcoholic. She probably had an alcoholic father, right? She wants to save him, and you're trying to tell her you shouldn't marry him. You're marrying him for the wrong reasons. You can't save anybody, and he's got a lot of problems, and it's not going to be good for you. I can deal with it, right? And maybe even has an abusive past. And you're like, now, what's hard in our world today is it's almost impossible. They said, why'd you marry? Why in the church? Why did you let them get married? It's like, it's impossible. I can't, because today we are so convinced of the overwhelming feelings of my judgment of reality that any kind of reason is almost impossible to get through to us as human beings today. That's kind of it's like, can you pull away and look what's happening here? And unfortunately, that happens. And, sometimes multiple marriages, because I do annulments, multiple marriages, like, how many alcoholics are you going to marry? And it can't help. It's a sad thing. One last thing I want to end, and this is where I'm going to end because I'm 50 minutes old. Some rules always apply. 1789. And all of this, one may never do evil so that good may result from it. That's solid Catholic teaching. So anytime you think you're going to do, but good will come, never will evil be, never. The golden rule, whatever you wish that men do to you, do to them. Do so to them. Never do anything to others what you would not have done to you. So if you'd say, well, yeah, you know what? I can do this. And I say, yeah, well, how would you like it if somebody did that to you? The whole phrase, still old wisdom that we always lived with, still true in our faith, right? How would you like it if everybody did that to you? So, and then let me do the one last one, and then we can ask a question. Charity always precedes the way of respect for one's neighbor and one's conscience. Thus, sinning against your brethren and wounding their conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, it is right not to anything to make your brother stumble. Therefore, one of the things which I think is important is that you recognize that someone might have a frail conscience, right? For whatever reason, they think that's bad. Even though you could do something that's not wrong for you, let's say you're matured and you say, I don't think this is wrong. Sometimes hurting the conscience of another, charity prevails. You don't do it so that someone else's conscience doesn't get picked up, doesn't get stuff. So for me, I always tell this, right? There's nothing wrong with me going to the Blue Goose, right? I could go down there and have a couple of drinks. But I can understand that if I did do that, and someone said, Father went over to have a couple of drinks at the local bar. You know, he's over there. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not doing anything wrong. I know, but I wouldn't do it. I can't do it because others would think, you know, what's he doing that for? I always say that when, even if somebody gave me a Mercedes, I'd love to have a Mercedes. I love the Mercedes. I love driving one. They have cool, right? And even if I bought one that had been in the floods of Florida, right, for half price at an auction, for a quarter price at an auction, but was actually given to me by my dead uncle, right, and I inherited, I still can't own it. Because if I drive around in a Mercedes, no matter if it was given to me, and it was not only given to me, but it was actually a piece of junk. I have it in the car, trying to fix it. Even if I fix it myself and try to work on it, I can't do it. I have to rip off that Mercedes thing because everybody will start judging me. And they're like, look, that's where our collection's going, right? Our collection's going to his Mercedes. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not at all. But that's what people do. And I have some responsibility for my parishioners. I don't want to scandalize them, even though their car probably is 10 times worth what my car would be. It's just mine's, 20 years old and broken. It doesn't matter. So.
I think that with the situation we were in when people had to make a decision to kill somebody, that could happen in the church.
Oh, yeah.
That all of a sudden you tell someone, yes, you can shoot now, because they're coming in to just hurt everybody.
That's right.
And so it is evil, it's not right, but it's wrong not to do it because all these people have died.
You may bring up a good point that I want to end with, too, is that one of the things that's very different about is that evil can exist, but I don't have any culpability for it. In other words, I don't carry the weight of it. For example, if somebody were to come into the church with a machine gun and start shooting people, and I shoot the person, because I carry a concealed weapon and I shoot the person, okay? Now, I am saving all these lives. I'm stopping this every life, okay? But that doesn't mean that my shooting him was not evil. It was evil. It was never a good to shoot him. It would be always an evil to kill. However, I don't carry responsibility for the evil because, see, in other words, the evil is not imputed in me, or we say that I don't have any culpability in this evil because I tried to stop the evil. Do you see that difference? Because some people will say, well, it wasn't wrong to do that. It's always wrong to kill. It's always evil to kill. I should say evil. Now, when I use the word wrong, I'm usually imputing responsibility on me, like I was wrong. No, the situation is wrong. This should never have happened. We should never call that my having to kill a guy with a machine gun a good thing. It's an evil thing, So evil has happened. That separates evil from culpability and responsibility for this evil. That's why sometimes, we do things that we had no choice. Accidents happen. Well, accidents happen because evil is in the world. But I'm not responsible for the evil because it was an accident. I don't have any culpability for it. This is going to be a separation because you could see how muddy the language is when you're having discussions with people on TV. They muddy all the language. It's like, wait a second, if I use the word wrong, I'm often applying it to a person. You're wrong, right? When I say evil, I can say evil can exist without anybody in this room being responsible for the evil that exists. However, oftentimes we say, what you did is evil. What I did was evil, but that didn't make me evil, right? It doesn't mean I'm evil. It means that I have this other responsibility, the other circumstances around this that removes my culpability, and that's that section in the Catechism. Yeah, but it cleans up the language because we have very poor language, and sometimes when I'm watching people, and it's like the difference between killing and murder. Murder, when you use the word murder, it's usually intention. You never murder someone by accident. You kill someone by accident. When you murder, it means I I have the intent in there that carried with that word is like, I want you dead, so I murder you, right? Well, that's not the same thing as when I say, well, I killed somebody, but I killed him because I was going to be killed myself, or I saved this other lady from being killed because he was going to kill her, you know. So does that make sense? But that cleans up the language, because you have these terrible discussions with people, and they're all shouting at each other, and you know, and it's like, I don't think it's very helpful, because nobody's even defining the right words. So I like this thing. This is where we all stand. We all stand around with heads down. All right, good. By the way, you're going to do 1790, because erroneous judgment. Human beings must always obey certain judgments of their conscience. If he were deliberately to act against it, he would be condemning himself. You should always act for your conscience. Yet it can happen that moral conscience remains in ignorance and makes erroneous judgments about acts that to be performed or already committed. And this is what I want to give you as 792. You can be responsible for having a bad conscience, because you should have known. That's the other thing. For example, if the speed limit is 25 and you're going 50, you should have known it was 25, because that's your responsibility to know the speed limit. And it's your responsibility as a Catholic to know what God wants from you. All right? So therefore, the ignorance can be the fault of the individual. 1791. When you do anything to find out what is good and true, conscience is binding by the habit of sin, and you are culpable for the evil. 1792, ignorance of Christ and his gospel. Look, if you don't know who Jesus is and you claim to, some people have, Jesus. It's like, Jesus never would have said that. Bad example given by others, right? You're going to follow your parents. You know, if your parents did the wrong thing, doesn't give you the right to do the wrong thing. Enslavement of one's passions, right? These are things that are the sources of you making bad judgments. The assertion of a mistaken notion of the autonomy of your conscience, you know, that your conscience has the mistaken notion of how autonomous, like your conscience doesn't need to be informed by all these things. The rejection of the church's authority in her teaching, the lack of conversion and charity, these can be at the source of your errors. All right, and then the good and the pure conscience is enlightened by true faith. And this is where, look, 1793. If ignorance is invincible, in other words, there's no way you would have known about this, then it's not responsible for the erroneous judgment. For example, a mentally challenged person, right, does something. Now, let's say he has no concept, that was never developed, has the brain part's not there, he does something, we say that evil has still happened, it's still evil, right? But that person has what they call invincible ignorance. There is no way that person could have overcome and could have known. Someone born on an island who never knew Jesus will never know the teachings of Jesus until somebody teaches them the teachings of Jesus, right? So that was invincible ignorance. If he died on the island, he was the only one on the island, use the extreme example, that kind of thing, make an example. So, but evil is not imputed to him, but it's still evil. Therefore, you, as a Catholic, have the obligation to form your conscience. And if you don't, and it wasn't invincible, you had the ability to do it, you just didn't do it, then you carry the responsibilities for the evil that you've done. At least that's what the church teaches. You will be responsible. So, book up, learn your faith, and do the good. All right? But, so you can't claim to God, because one of the things, if you say, like, God, I didn't know, his answer will be, you should have known. You know, because you could have known. If you weren't so self-absorbed, you would have known. All right, glory be. We're going to talk about virtues, and after that, the virtues are a nice thing. A little happier, but conscience is a big thing now. All right. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. By the way, I shut off all the comments on the YouTube so nobody can comment on what I said. Because, whew, that would be awful. Anytime you want to talk about anything, I'm always open to it. I open to anything.
The thing, like when you talk about communicating and the nuances in words, how
Yeah. Hang on, Arlette, 1 second. I'm talking to somebody, and I'll be right with you.
in the work that I do, I talk to many, many people. We would